For 4 years, my parents told everyone I was dead to the family, or worse, gone for good. They said I disappeared without warning after refusing to send them money. Relatives blamed me. Neighbors pitied them. Even my own brother believed their story. But the truth was completely different. I hadn't disappeared. I had simply stopped paying their bills, stopped answering their demands, and quietly built a life 3 hours away. Then, one morning, my brother showed up at my door. He looked around my beautiful home, stared at me, and whispered, "Why did Mom tell us you lost everything?" The first time my mother told someone I had disappeared, I was sitting 3 hours away from home, at my kitchen table, paying my electricity bill. I remember because I almost laughed when my aunt called me that afternoon. "Your mother is worried sick," she said. "She says nobody knows where you are." I looked around my apartment. My coffee was beside my laptop, my phone was charging, and my car was parked outside. "I'm not missing," I said. There was a long silence. Then she whispered, "That's not what your parents are saying." I was the oldest child. My younger brother, Daniel, had always been the easy one in my parents' eyes. He could make mistakes, change jobs, borrow money, and somehow still be treated like the family's golden child. I was different. I was the responsible one. The one who finished college without asking for help, found a steady job, and learned that if something went wrong, I was expected to handle it. At first, helping my parents financially didn't bother me. Dad had retired earlier than planned. Mom had expenses, and their house needed repairs. When they called asking for help with a mortgage payment or an unexpected bill, I sent the money. Sometimes it was $200, sometimes $500. Once, I covered nearly $3,000 because their roof needed repairs before winter. Every time, Mom said the same thing: "You're such a good daughter." And I believed her. I thought it was my responsibility. I thought I was helping my family through a difficult period. But slowly something changed. The emergencies stopped sounding like emergencies. "Can you send us $600 this month? Can you cover the insurance? Your father's car needs work. We're short on the property taxes." Then came the sentence I heard more than any other: "You can afford it." That became my parents' answer to everything. If I mentioned saving for a house, they said I could afford to help. If I said I wanted a vacation, they reminded me that family came first. When I admitted I was worried about my savings, Mom became quiet and said, "I guess we know where we stand now." So I sent more. For nearly 4 years, money left my account every month and went into theirs. I didn't keep score at first. Then one night I did. I opened my banking app and added everything. The number made my stomach drop. I had sent my parents more than $40,000. $40,000 that could have been sitting in my savings account. $40,000 I had earned while telling myself I was being a good daughter. And what made it worse was what I discovered the following weekend. My parents weren't broke. Not exactly. They had retirement income. They had savings. They had a house with substantial equity. They weren't facing homelessness. They simply didn't want to change the way they were living. I confronted them gently. "I can't keep doing this." Dad stared at me across the kitchen table. "What do you mean?" "I mean I'm stopping the monthly transfers." Mom's face changed immediately. Not sadness. Not fear. Anger. "After everything we've done for you?" I almost couldn't believe what I was hearing. "I've been helping for years. And you're our daughter," Dad said. "Family doesn't abandon family when things get difficult." "I'm not abandoning you. I'm asking you to handle your own finances." Mom pushed her chair back. "You've changed." Maybe I had. Maybe that was the problem. For the first time, I wasn't making decisions based on what my parents needed. I was making one based on what I needed. I left that evening expecting an angry phone call. Instead, I got silence. 3 days. Then a week. Then 2. Finally, my aunt called. She asked if I was safe. I said yes. She sounded relieved. Then she said something that made my entire body go cold. "Your parents told everyone you disappeared." I didn't know what to say. Because I hadn't disappeared. I had simply stopped sending money. And apparently, in my parents' version of the story, those two things meant exactly the same thing. For years passed after that phone call. I didn't correct every relative. I didn't post explanations online. I simply kept living. But slowly something changed. The silence became peaceful. I found a better apartment. I received a promotion. I started putting money into savings instead of immediately moving it into my parents' account. For the first time in years, I could look at my bank balance without wondering which emergency would drain it next. Then the calls started. Not from my parents. From relatives. My aunt said Mom was devastated. Another relative told me my parents couldn't understand why I had cut them off. Every version sounded different, but the ending was always the same. I was the selfish daughter who had disappeared. Then, one Saturday morning, my aunt told me something that changed everything. Your mother says you became unstable after the money argument. I actually laughed. Unstable. She says you stopped talking to everyone. She says she tried reaching you. I looked at my phone. Same number. Same email. Nothing had changed. How many times did she say she called? My aunt hesitated. She didn't give me a number. Of course she didn't. That afternoon, I opened the old messages I had saved. There they were. My mother's texts. Can you send 300? Your father needs his medication. We have a bill due Friday. Don't forget what you promised. There wasn't one message asking if I was okay, because I hadn't stopped responding until they stopped talking to me. I started saving everything. Bank transfers, screenshots, old emails, and every request my parents had made. The more I organized, the clearer the pattern became. They hadn't lost contact with me. They had chosen to erase me from the family story. I discovered why when my cousin mentioned something during a phone call. She said, "Your parents keep telling people they're struggling because you stopped helping them." I froze. What? They say you used to support them, then suddenly decided they weren't worth your money anymore. I stared at my laptop. That was the story. Not that I had sent money for years or finally reached my limit. They had turned my boundary into betrayal. I asked my cousin, "Do they tell people they still have their retirement accounts?" She went quiet. No. That answer told me everything. My parents weren't simply embarrassed. They needed everyone to believe they were victims. Then I learned something worse. They had been telling my younger brother, Daniel, that I thought I was better than the family. That one hurt. Daniel and I had never been especially close, but I had always protected him. Apparently, none of that made it into the story. Only the part where I finally said no. I kept documenting everything, because if they ever decided to tell their story in front of me, I wanted the truth sitting beside me. Then, for years after I supposedly disappeared, my phone rang. It was Daniel. When I finally did, he didn't say hello. He said, "I know where you are." My stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" "Mom and Dad told me to find you." "Why?" Then Daniel said, "They want you to come home." I almost laughed. After 4 years? They say they need you. There it was. Not they miss you. Not they love you. They need you. I told him I wasn't going back. Then his voice changed. "I don't think they told me the whole story." "What makes you say that?" "Because they were talking about your money." I closed my eyes. Everything suddenly made sense. My parents hadn't sent Daniel to find their missing daughter. They had sent him to find the daughter they believed they could still use. Daniel asked if he could meet me. I agreed, but not at my home. We met at a cafe the next afternoon. He looked older, more tired and uncertain. He told me our parents were struggling financially. Then he admitted something else. "They found out you're doing well." I stared at him. "How?" "Mom heard from someone you bought a place." So that was it. For 4 years, I had been the daughter who supposedly vanished. But when they discovered I had built a life without them, they knew exactly where to look. Daniel swallowed. "Can I see your place?" I hesitated, because I knew that once my brother saw the truth, there would be no way for my parents to keep their story alive. Daniel parked outside my apartment building at 10 the next morning. When I opened the door, he stepped inside slowly and looked around. He looked around the living room, the bookshelves, the photographs, and the small dining table beside the window. Finally, he turned toward me. "You did all this?" Apparently, I didn't disappear. He looked embarrassed. "I didn't mean it like that." "I know. Daniel sat down. Can we talk? We spent the next 2 hours talking. I showed him the bank records first. There were transfers covering years.
Hundreds of them.
Mortgage payments, insurance,
Repairs.
medical expenses, grocery money, emergency payments. Daniel stared at the screen. How much? I told him. He leaned back. 40,000? More. He rubbed his forehead. I had no idea. They didn't want you to. Then I showed him the messages. There was Mom asking for money, Dad demanding it, Mom telling me I should remember my responsibilities. And then there was the final conversation. The one where I said I couldn't continue. Daniel read it twice. You weren't angry, he said.
No.
You weren't abandoning them.
No.
You just said no. Yes. I should have known. He looked down at his hands. Then he whispered, they lied. After a long silence, Daniel pulled out his phone. I'm calling Mom. I do. He pressed the number. Mom answered almost immediately. Did you find her?
Daniel looked at me.
Yes. There was silence on the other end. Then Mom's voice changed. Where is she? She's fine. Put her on the phone. Daniel's jaw tightened. She doesn't want to talk to you. Daniel, this is a family matter. He laughed bitterly.
No.
It became a family matter when you told everyone she disappeared. Mom started talking quickly. She said they had been worried. She said I had shut everyone out. She said they only wanted their daughter back. Daniel interrupted her. Why didn't you tell me she was sending you money for years? Silence. I could hear Mom breathing. What does that have to do with anything? Everything. Then Dad came onto the call. His voice was firm. This is ridiculous. Your sister has always been dramatic.
Daniel looked at me.
I could see the anger in his eyes now. Dad, she showed me everything. Another silence. Then he asked, everything what? The transfers. The messages. All of it. Dad's voice became quieter. She helped because she's our daughter. I finally stepped closer. Being your daughter was never supposed to mean becoming your paycheck. Nobody spoke. For the first time in 4 years, I felt no guilt. No need to explain. No need to convince them. Just relief. Mom started crying. She said they had made mistakes. She said they were desperate. She promised they would change. I asked one question. If you loved me, why did you tell everyone I disappeared? Mom couldn't answer. Dad tried. We didn't know what else to say. I nodded. That is the first honest thing you've said. Daniel ended the call. Then he sat there quietly. I should have believed you, he said. I looked at him. You believed what they told you. That's not an excuse. No, I said. But it's a start. For the first time, he wasn't looking at me as the selfish sister from their stories. He was looking at me as someone who had been carrying a burden alone for years without help. Over the next few weeks, the family story began falling apart. Daniel told our relatives what he'd seen. My aunt called and apologized. My cousin apologized too. Not everyone did. Some relatives still believed my parents. Others decided they didn't want to get involved. And strangely, I was okay with that. I had spent years trying to prove I was a good daughter. I didn't need to anymore. Daniel and I started rebuilding our relationship slowly. Coffee on Sundays. Short phone calls. Eventually, dinner. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. My parents never got the access they wanted again. I didn't punish them. I didn't expose them publicly. I didn't try to destroy their lives. I simply stopped financing a life that wasn't mine. For years earlier, they told everyone I had disappeared. The truth was much simpler. I hadn't disappeared. I had finally stopped disappearing into their demands. And once I learned how peaceful my own life could be, I never wanted to lose myself again.